Today's video, we're going to talk about mastering the techniques of dubbing noodles. Now, a dubbing noodle is basically where you take your thread and you spin some kind of fur or fiber onto that thread, making it fuzzy for the insect's body. Very similar to like a chenille. Now, a lot of guys just spin it on there, no rhyme, no reason, and I was guilty of that for years as well. I'm going to show you guys a technique that will give you way more control. It'll give you way more ability to even tie dubbing down onto size, mid-20s to 30s hooks, where you can get really small and you can really taper that thing down. So if you follow along, I will show you guys these techniques. Now, I have a big hook in here. This hook is a size 6. This is actually way too big, and I'm actually using some big thread. So this is going to be so you guys can see it on the camera a little bit better, because if we get down small, it's going to be kind of hard to show it. So I'm going to move the camera in to where you guys can see this technique, and it will work. Like I say, with anything, you're just going to go with a smaller hook and smaller thread, of course. So I'm going to tie my thread in. Get my tail up out of the way. Okay, so now I'm going to move my camera down for you guys. So I've got some hare's mask, which is pretty much the most common type of dubbing that there is. This is kind of what's been the norm for years. Now, this package here dates me. I bet this thing's 30, 40 years old. Bought it when I was a kid. So we're going to take our dubbing. I got a little pinch of dubbing out of here. Now, to start with this technique, you're going to take your dubbing and we're going to do what's called carding. We're going to grab it in our hands and we're going to pull it apart. And you'll feel the resistance when you pull it apart. Stack it back together, pull it apart. Stack it back together, pull it apart. Stack it back together, pull it apart. Once you do that a few times, you're going to tell a difference. It's really going to get easy to do it. And when you get it to the point where you're not feeling that resistance, you've accomplished the mission we're trying to do. So by doing that, we now have all of these fibers horizontal with our line. They have all been pulled apart and lined up together. So all these fibers in my hands are stacked this way. So what we want to do is we want to turn that 90 degrees. So now those fibers are lined up perfect with our thread. So what we're going to do is we're going to pinch them off and we're just going to spin them onto our thread. So when we spin this noodle onto our thread, we're always going to leave the bottom part where we tie on loose. So we're going to tie and tie and tie, or excuse me, spin and spin up here and get that nice and tight, but we're going to leave this bottom loose. And the reason we're going to do that is when we get to the point where we need to add more, those fibers are loose so we can tie in and blend in with the next ones. If you don't do that, they won't be one solid unit, and the technique I'm going to show you won't work. So you can see they're loose at the bottom, but we're going to start towards the rear of the fly, and we want to make a really tight noodle, let's say for a really small fly, or to make a real graduated taper in a fly. So we have this real small. Now this is bigger thread and a bigger hook, so this is going to be a little bit bigger than normal. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our thread and we're just going to spin our thread. Spin the thread in your hand as many times as you can. I'm going counterclockwise. I always go counterclockwise. I don't know if it matters. And as you're spinning that, this is exaggerated because the camera's so close, but you can see that noodle's got way smaller. So what you do is you hold that noodle in your hand, and then you wrap that noodle on to your fly. Now you can see that is super small. So all you're doing, I'm going to add a little bit more. So now I've sat my material down. I don't know which way I sat it, so I'm going to card it again. Now this time when I did it, there's no resistance whatsoever, so I know that the fibers are all going this way. So I'm going to turn it back to a 90. You can see how I've got that loose piece right there. I'm just going to add some more right into it. Now, if you don't do that, when you try to spin this fiber together, it won't spin together because it's not a united piece of fur. So we want to take and spin it again. And you can see we're just going counterclockwise, just spinning it just like you were spinning your dubbing on. Whatever direction you're spinning your dubbing on is what way you need to do this. And you can see the end is loose, so I can tie the next piece in. I'm going to hold that thread with my dubbing noodle, and I'm going to just twist that little piece on. So now I want to do a taper to the insect to where it grows gradually. So instead of making a great big bunch of them, we're going to take our piece, we're going to card it again. There's no resistance. You can literally see the fibers are all going in the one direction. We're going to put them in our hand at a 90 so that they line right back up. We're going to twist these fibers in together. Once we get them in together, we have one consistent noodle. Get my thread back in. Now we can start bringing that thread forward and building a bigger body. So if you're wanting to taper up, you can taper up. All you do is leave these fibers at the end loose so the next pieces can come in, and it builds a complete united mass. Now see, I have quite a bit of noodle there. I can still spin that down. And when you do that, it'll make that noodle tighter and tighter and tighter. And when you make it tight, you can spin it with your hand just as such. And it will build a perfect taper. Now again, this is a giant hook for what we're doing. I just wanted you to be able to see it. And I'm also using like 2 tendennier thread, which is way thick. But with doing what we've done, we can make that noodle where it's extremely small at the back and you can graduate up however you need to, and you have the ultimate thread control. And this is all tight. It's not going to fall apart. It's not strung out. It's not going to come loose as you're tying it. It's one consistent noodle, and like I say, you can get that thing down just barely bigger than your thread by spinning your thread with that on there. So I hope this tip helps, guys. This is really something to play with and try. It will make your bugs way more consistent, massively more durable, and you're just going to get a lot better look by doing that. You're going to save money on materials because you're not wasting as much dubbing, and getting it lined up is just really going to work good. If you want it bushy, just take your brush and you can just brush it out just like anything else. It'll work just the same, but that is tied in there so much better and so much more control that you can add as you need to. You can do this technique and you can spin dubbing on it. I've tied it onto a size 30 hook. It works on any hook. The smaller ones, it actually works better. So I hope this tips help, and we'll see you in the next video.